Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of HoloTalk for the week of February 15th, 1999. And happy Valentine's Day to all the ladies who tune into the show from me to you. This week, our guest is Dr. Bert Meyers, who for nearly 12 years worked with holographic medical imaging at the Veterans Administration Hospital in New Orleans, Louisiana. Dr. Meyers worked to develop holography as a teaching tool, with the end result being three-dimensional holographic images in medical textbooks. And Dr. Meyers will be on in just a minute to tell us about his research. Upcoming guests and shows, we have Ron Olson coming up in 2 weeks, and you may have already seen Ron's pulsed holography work with wildlife and portraits. I'll be talking with him about that and also about his upcoming book to be published soon. Other shows coming up will examine just how diverse a field holography is, with a show dedicated to holographic sound recordings, which will include a few incredible sound samples that you will be able to download and listen to, and also a show on how holography and holographic principles explain the world around us and the universe in which we live. So we've got quite a few very exciting weeks coming up, and I hope you tune back in to enjoy them. I had lunch with Steve Michael this past Saturday in a small town in Pennsylvania, which was midpoint traveling for both of us. So hello to Steve if you're listening. I had a chance to get a look at Steve's first split-beam laser pointer hologram, and it was absolutely beautiful. He did this using a $14.95 laser pointer, and the image quality was just as good as holograms he's made using his 35 milliwatt spectrophysics He-Nee laser. But more on that on a later show, since we've taken quite a few shows lately devoted entirely to laser pointer holography, so keep tuned for updates on that. Due to many requests, I now have all the past shows from this season as well as last season up on the web for your enjoyment. And in the future, as each show moves down from one to another, I will post those shows and make them available to you right away. I had planned on using reruns during the summer each week until each new fall season starts, but now you've got them all available to you in one shot. So if you click on the link for past shows, you'll see them all posted there. I've also received a few emails asking when I would be interviewed on HoloTalk. And while I appreciate the interest, I don't have any plans on being a guest anytime soon. So maybe next season. I will be appearing at the Tinton Falls, New Jersey Holiday Inn Conference Center as keynote speaker for the Central New Jersey Mensa Conference on Saturday evening, March 6th. If you'd like to come out to the presentation, send an email along and I'll return the details to you. Okay, here's the interview with Dr. Bert Meyers. I'm not coming back on after the interview, so I'll thank you for tuning in now and hope you continue to tune in each and every week for a new HoloTalk show. But first, this quick message, and then right into the Bert Meyers interview.
Would you like to make your own one-of-a-kind hologram and learn how you can start making holograms on your own at the same time? You can do this and much more by attending one of Frank DeFreitas' holography workshops. From beginner to advanced, Frank's got a workshop that's just right for you. From single afternoon, evening, or weekend introductory workshops to Wednesday evening, 5-week complete courses. And don't forget his newest workshop, Laser Pointer Holography. Located just off the northeast extension of the Pennsylvania Turnpike and Interstate 78, the studio is a quick, non-stop drive from the New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, Washington, D.C. areas. For more information, call the studio's toll-free hotline at 1-800-458-3525 and begin your own journey with holography today. That's 1-800-458-3525 for more information on attending a Frank DeFreitas holography workshop today.
Hello, Dr. Meyers.
Yes.
This is Frank DeFreitas. How are you?
Oh, fine.
Do you have a few moments?
Yes, I do.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the work that you did with holography and the medical imaging for the HoloTalk show. And I'd also like to ask you if you could tell the listeners a little bit about the X-ray photography that you did years ago.
Years ago, I, in my medical research, studied, I'm a surgeon, wound healing, how wounds heal, and I was very interested in whether the rate that blood vessels grow into wounds would affect the healing, and whether we could speed it up or slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked out techniques of taking x-rays of the very tiny blood vessels, capillaries, and what's called a microcirculation. In looking at those x-rays, some of them looked like abstract art. There were bizarre lines running all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it might be interesting to pursue x-rays in art form. I started x-raying shells and flowers and just about anything else caught my fancy, developed it into a sort of an art form. I wasn't the first to do it, although I didn't know it at the time. There were already 2 other people in the United States doing it, and since then 2 or 3 more have taken it up.
I see. And you've recently begun working with that again, haven't you?
Yeah, I got into holography much later. I've always had a research lab, and my funding, in other words, I had no grant money to hire technicians and do the work, but I had a very nice lab with a darkroom as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for something new to do, and I had the strong background in photography, having studied with Ansel Adams years ago.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, back in 1970.
Wow. Did you ever have any of your work in Reader's Digest?
Yes, I did. The X-ray, Reader's Digest did an article on my X-ray photography sometime in the 80s. I don't remember exactly when.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah. I thought it went back a little further than the 80s, but maybe it was the 80s, considering it's almost 2000 now. The 80s would be almost 20 years ago now. What you were doing with holography is very interesting. I have a few of the holograms that you sent me, and I still exhibit them.
Well, my original intention was that 3-dimensional images would be better teaching devices than conventional ones, and the field had just started, and they were just developing methods of mass-producing the images.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Polaroid had come out with its photopolymer film and forgot what you call them now, the stamped images.
Oh, the embossed holograms.
Embossed images were around. I thought there was no reason those couldn't be in textbooks, and they would be better teaching devices than the usual ones. So I set up a lab basically to make holograms for teaching purposes, and spent about 12 years doing that. Made holograms of bones and various tissue specimens.
Now, you were using continuous wave.
Yeah, I didn't have a pulse laser, although I wanted one. I applied for several grants to buy a pulse laser, but was never funded. So I used a heat like everyone else at the time.
Yeah. I remember you writing to me when you were in your lab. That was down at the Veterans Administration Hospital in New Orleans, right?
Right.
And you said that you actually had an air conditioning unit that was right outside of your lab, right?
Well, when I first started, I had this lab for the wound work, and it was it just happens one of the other investigators here won the Nobel Prize. Wow. And Congress got all excited because the first time a VA investigator won the Nobel Prize, basically said, what do you want? We want you to stay in the VA. What will it do? He said, well, I need space. So they built him a beautiful building, and all the other investigators like me got space in it.
Oh, I see.
So I had this brand new space with a darkroom in it to do the X-ray work, and I thought I'd just start doing holograms. I took TJ's course. It's Dr. Jung in Lake Forest, who at the time was considered the best teacher. And with my background photography, I thought I'd have no trouble making images. So when I got back to New Orleans, I bought a laser, made a homemade table, and for 1 year got absolutely no images, just blank film.
No kidding.
And I was really stumped. Finally realized the problem was immediately below the lab was the main air conditioning unit for the animal lab where they kept the dogs and the rabbits and the rats. It was a 120 horsepower motor that basically was running continuously.
It was probably attached to the ceiling below you, right?
I don't know, but it was obviously shaking the room. I wasn't aware of it. I didn't feel it or hear it, but I got no holograms.
Jeez.
Finally, I talked somebody into swapping labs with me. It was in the same building, but it was at the other end, which wasn't ideal, but at least I was able to get images.
Yeah.
And I kept that space for 12 years.
Now, there was a special process that had to be used for a lot of the items that you made a hologram of, such as...
well, because of the... all living things contain water. And as the water evaporates, the cells shrink. That includes both plants and animals. And human tissue has to be kept in formaldehyde or something similar, or it rots. And as long as it's submerged in the preservative, it'll keep indefinitely. But if you take it out, like to put it on a hologram table, it would dry out quickly and you'd have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There is another way of preserving tissue. It was actually discovered by a German pathologist, in which he put the tissue in a very high vacuum and literally sucked all the water out of the cells, then replaced it with a resin or plastic, so that the final product was essentially water-free and fairly rigid. It looked like the original specimen, except some of the color was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And he claimed they would last in air forever.
No kidding.
He called the technique plastination, and a lot of labs around the world do it. United States, there's one main one. It's in Mercer University in Macon, Georgia.
Okay.
And I was able to get... What happened was the man that did the plastinate specimens used them for teach. Well, they do last forever, but they're not indestructible. If you hand them out to medical students, they would wear away.
Yeah.
So about 20 years before, he had the idea of making holograms of the specimens and using the holograms as a teaching device. He had applied for an NIH grant and was turned down, and basically he forgot about it. Meanwhile, years later, one of my ex-residents at OSU in New Orleans became chairman of the Department of Surgery at Mercer and mentioned there was someone in New Orleans doing medical holography. And the other guy remembered, and he got us together, and so he started sending me his specimens, which I would make the holograms on and send them back. So I was able to get good holograms of human specimens, cancers, and various things.
Yeah.
And another funny story, he retired and told me he didn't know if the school was going to replace him, so I was looking for another source of specimens, and I got on the web, and somebody from Montreal wrote back that he did plastination too. So I emailed him, would he lend me the specimens? And he said yes, but only during the summer, because we do use them to teach, to give to the students.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, fine, mail me 2 or 3 next summer. I'll get them back before school opens. He said, I'll do better. I'll bring them down. I said, well, you don't have to do that. He said, well, I'd like to see New Orleans. That's a good excuse. So he arrives, and I got 2 shocks. One, he didn't speak English. He was a French, one of the Quebecians that don't pride themselves. They don't. I mean, he knew English, but it was beneath him.
Yeah.
To speak. Well, of course, he did speak English, and we were able to communicate. He gave me 3 specimens that I kept and were able to image.
Now, if someone's out there listening to this show that does holography, and they'd like to do some of these medical images, is it very expensive to order some of these?
I don't know. I don't think any are sold.
Oh, I see.
I could give you this Mercer. He could just... I don't know if my friend who was supposed to retire has been replaced, but it's Department of Pathology, Mercer University School of Medicine, Macon, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough address. And if someone's doing it, he may be glad to lend them to him.
Yeah. So the images that you sent to me were very nice. I think you sent the inside of a heart to me.
Well, I made maybe 100 in the 12 years. They were good. I had a lot of others that were, not so bright.
Why do you think that there was never funding for this? It seems like it would be like a very interesting aspect.
Well, my feeling, I just truly could not get anybody else interested in it other than me. I even gave some to my own medical school. I gave them a framed hologram and a track light with a 100-watt halogen bulb in it to display it. Free, and they wouldn't even hang it up.
You see, that is I just can't even comprehend that.
Yeah, well, you're one of the few optimists in the field. Most of the people I talked to had similar experiences to mine. Nobody is really interested. You go to a meeting and they say, gee, that's pretty, but that's the end of it.
Yeah, that's the end of it. Now, there was actually a company that was manufacturing a holographic viewer for medical images as well.
The X-ray, that was called Voxel.
Yeah, Voxel.
Yeah, they had a great idea. They could take any image on magnetic tape, that's CTs, MRs, sonograms, whatever, and that was in slices, like all them are, and put all the slices into one hologram. So you had one sheet of film which had a full 3D image of what the technique showed, and they were beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They had worked the technique. It's a man named Stephen Hart, who was actually an astronomer from England, I think, had an English accent, and he worked the technique out. He got funding. He even went public. They sold stock in it.
Yeah.
And for a while, it looked like they were doing great. At least the stock went up for a little while. Then the problem they had, their idea was to sell hospitals the machines to make the hologram. Now, they had made some. They had the hospital send them the magnetic tape, either by mail or if you had a fast data line. I think they call it ISDN line.
Yeah.
They would send the CT to the California thing, and they would make the hologram in 24 hours and send it back air express. And doing that, they were able to make beautiful images. Then they were a stock company trying to make money, and their idea was to sell a machine to do this on site. And they spent 5 years and I don't know how many millions of dollars, but never got the machine to work. The usual problems, I think, motion. They had not, whoever made the machine for them had never made a holography. They'd made photographic copying machines, and they didn't realize how strict the vibration control had to be.
But
that's my opinion. That's not what they told me.
Yeah.
Since I sweated with motion for 12 years. But the sad thing is they're bankrupt now, and I don't know what, if anything's going on, but they're in the Los Angeles area. And I was there about a year ago. They were still open, but I heard that they're not now, but I can't swear to that.
Yeah, but things were all right for them as long as they were doing the imaging, right? It's when they started to think about manufacturing the machines.
Well, that was their idea from the beginning.
Yeah.
Last time I talked to Steve, he said he realized he made a mistake. They should have just kept with the images and not try to market a machine. But it's too late for that, I think, unless maybe they're starting over again.
What was your assistant's name that worked in your lab for a while? I cannot remember her name. The assistant holographer that you had there for a while. She was an artist.
Well, she really wanted to. There was a young girl named Madeline Faust.
Yes.
Who was really a sculptor. She wanted to learn holography as an art form, and she worked with me really as a helper, but doing her own images. But she, at the time, was single and had to earn a living as an artist, which is virtually impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think she was a capable artist. Anyway, after we each had maybe 20 good images, we had a show at the most prestigious art gallery in New Orleans. Had big crowds, good reviews, but we did not sell one image. And that discouraged her because she was looking at it, as a way to earn money, and she kind of quit after that.
Yeah.
Although she was still interested, she just didn't make anymore.
Did you say at one point that you were trying to do holograms using the diodes?
I had the idea of when the diodes first came out. Since I had originally studied with TJ, I kind of kept in touch with him, and whenever I had a question, I'd call him, and I asked him, can you make holograms with these new cheap diodes? And he said, no. And I didn't even pursue it any further. He said you probably could if you had a power supply to get a coherent beam out of a diode. He thought you needed a very constant power supply.
Yeah.
And he estimated to build a power supply would cost more than a helium neon. I don't know if he was wrong. Apparently he was wrong because you did.
Yeah, we're actually all in shock over this, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's a real improvement for the average person to be able to make a hologram with a $10 laser.
Yeah, Steve Michael just reported last week that he was able to make an H1 and H2 copy, so now we know that we can even do split beam holography with the diodes. But they're incredibly stable, very, very stable. I shot a beautiful 8x10 reflection hologram using the little 799 laser pointer, and it's beautiful. It has about 8 inches of depth to it.
Well, I'm glad, you're pursuing it. What finally happened to me, the space I had in the research building is really for people with grants.
Yeah.
And I applied for 5 different grants and was always turned down. The administration said, well, you can keep your space till somebody with a grant needs it.
Yeah.
Well, that happened last year. A guy had a really brilliant idea of doing gene manipulation in space. Apparently in zero gravity, things work differently. And he got a big grant from NASA, I think.
Yeah.
And he needed the space, so I got evicted, which I really couldn't complain. I had 11 years of free rent.
Yeah. But when you take into consideration the crazy things that grants are given out for...
Well, you never know what will be worthwhile 20 years from now.
That's absolutely incredible. I'm really sorry that you had such a hard time trying to get some support with the work that you've done, because it's beautiful work.
Well, I gave all the lasers and tables to a local university, so at least somebody's using it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're using it.
I don't think they're using it. I gave it to the physics department, and they were not interested in making, images for viewing. They were interested in teaching students the principles of light.
Yeah.
And once I visited to see what they were doing with it, they were making holograms of mirrors showing that the hologram had the property of the mirrors, convex, concave, flat, which was kind of an interesting project. I would never thought of doing. But
do you think you were just ahead of your time and that you're going to see a lot of medical holography in the future?
No, there's a lot of interest in 3D imaging in medicine, but it may not be. It might be holography, it might be computers, stereograms. I don't know which way it's going, but I think there will be some 3D imaging. Now, although I can't say that the history of that. So the first 3D image in medicine, remember the Viewmaster, the little round wheel with two? Well, the man that invented that apparently got fairly wealthy on it. Anyway, when he retired, he offered his services to Stanford University in Palo Alto. And they made, I think, like 5,000 stereograms of medical specimens for teaching. But they had the same problem. Nobody was interested in it. They tried to sell them. They even put out on a CD-ROM now, you can buy the whole anatomy course in 3D. But and the people that run that are enthused, but except for them, that's about it in all the field of medicine.
What are you doing now? Are you back with your X-ray photography?
Well, I'm thinking about retiring from medicine and doing X-ray photography full time, but probably won't for a year or two. My health is still good, and I enjoy working and teaching.
Mm-hmm. You worked with Jeff Murray, didn't you?
Yeah. The reason I went to Jeff, when I got my first spatial filter, I couldn't get that to line up. I'd heard about Jeff. He had a school in San Francisco. Well, actually, it was in Petaluma.
Yeah.
And over the phone, he said, well, I think I can teach you in 3 days how to work that thing. So I went out there and learned how to line up spatial film. And I stayed friendly with Jeff. He's out of the field, too, I think.
Yeah. Actually, I just heard today that he may be or is partnering with someone in New England.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, because he is the most practical person in Hawaii. TJ knows the theory, but how to make some, I found Jeff much more easy to talk to.
Yeah. He's a great guy. Jeff's a great guy. I've got to get him on the show.
Well, if you can find him, let me know his address. I'd like to keep in touch with him.
Okay, I will do that. Well, Dr. Meyers, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It was very interesting to hear about your work, and I'd like to let the HoloTalk listeners know that we not only have audio this week, but we've got video as well, because Dr. Meyers actually produced, you did about 3 videos on medical holography, didn't you? I think I have 3 separate videos of yours.
Yeah, well, the last one was the best one. I kept trying to improve it.
Yeah.
And it got shorter with each one, so the last one's about 9 minutes.
Yeah, so
that would be the one I'd show.
We're going to...
The first one had all the theory in it, and I find most people were bored with that. The last one just explains what the uses of it.
Yeah. That's going to be on the web as well, and you'll see a link for that right on the HoloTalk page below the link for the HoloTalk show, and you can watch Dr. Meyers' video on medical holography. Dr. Meyers, thank you very much.
And good luck. I'm glad you, Frank, you're still in the field doing new things like the laser emitting diodes. And because I still think there's hope for the field. Just hope somebody else gets interested in it between 5 or 10 of us in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I'm having a great time with it. I feel like a kid all over again. It's like a whole new age of discovery for me, because it's a whole new road ahead. Take care.
Fine, thank you.
Bye-bye.